She dreams in blood. She dreams of you. Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be discussing She Dreams in Blood, the second book in the Obsidian Path series by Michael R. Fletcher. And man, did I enjoy the heck out of this book. So I'm going to be assuming, if you're watching this video, that you have read Blackstone Heart, the first book in the Obsidian Path series, and I'm going to be blatantly spoiling things that happened in the first book. I will be getting into some spoiler talk on this book as well, but I'll give a warning before I do that and have timestamps so you can skip past if you want. But let's talk about this book. So, the first book of Obsidian Path, Blackstone Heart, ends with, because Fletcher kills the endings for both of these books, by the way, does the same thing here, but ends with a lot of kind of bombshells being dropped. We were following Crane, who is still trying to kind of figure out what's going on, find more pieces of himself. We have the drama of him killing Tien and realizing that that was Shanelin's sister and killing her right in front of her, and then going off on a ship with Henka, and then finding out from Nil, the demon in the Obsidian Mountain, that Henka actually was his wife thousands of years ago when he was the Demon Emperor, and has been, to an extent, manipulating him this whole time. And so, on all that bombshell, we start this next book. And man, this book really does start to explore a bit more of the world, and explore more of demonology, and explore more just what's going on. And we really get some interesting looks at it. Of course, we know the whole point of the series. He's trying to find more pieces of his heart. That's kind of where we end with the first book too. He's looking for more. But I really liked too that this felt, there was completely different things happening, but the story, this felt like basically just kind of continued with no interruption from the first book. We continue on the same things, we continue to learn more while there's still some mystery, but honestly, a lot of the things that really stood out about the first book are still completely here and just built upon, and that's something I really enjoy. We still get Crane struggling with his choices. He's trying to figure out what the right thing to do is. He's trying to figure out, does he want to be the man he was, or will he become a different man based on how he gets his memories back? And we really do, in this book especially, explore a lot more of the kind of philosophical looks at humanity and ideas about humanity. Specifically here, we look at, do the ends justify the means? What's the greater good and who defines it? Do the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few? Do you, if you need to sacrifice somebody to save many more people, is it worth it? We look at things like that, and also the idea of absolute power. And you have the saying, absolute power corrupts absolutely. That's explored as well. We just get a lot of these different ideas, these things that we've all heard about and thought about. And they're explored really, really well from this character who is, based on the situation the narrative has put them in such a unique position to really be thinking about these things. We're following somebody who doesn't fully know who they were yet still. Crane knows he was the Demon Emperor. He's still finding more and more about what he did and what happened, but he still has huge chunks of the why missing. He still doesn't really know the full picture. And likely won't for some time until he completely collects and has his entire heart, which, once again, from the first book we know is kind of scattered about the world. And so he's trying to figure these things out and kind of moving blindly through the world, trying to figure this out as he moves along as well. So really, really great philosophical commentary, basically, as he explores these things. And it's not necessarily, the thing I want to mention too, is none of it comes off as preachy or Fletcher is trying to get you to think one thing or another. It's specifically the commentary and the exploration is just part of the character study of Crane and of who he's having the conversations about these things with. You get multiple different viewpoints talked about where he'll be asking these questions either of himself, or ask questions of Henka, or of Nil, or of others, and we're getting all of these differing viewpoints. So at no point is Fletcher trying to shove something down her throat, Joe Abercrombie, but he does a great job of just exploring this and really like just looking at it and having it fit and really give you a deeper insight into the character. So that's something that I really, really appreciate. So I do want to get into some spoiler talk from here because there's some other things that I really feel like I have to discuss that were just very interesting and kind of it's really something I can't particularly explain without spoilers. So at this point, we're going to jump into spoilers. I will have a timestamp in the description if you want to skip past this and get to kind of the end summary part. But from here on out, spoilers will be commencing. So, we have Crane, who was traveling with Hanka to get to another area where a piece of his heart was, and on an island that they get shipwrecked on in a terrible storm. And then we do have another character who is along with them as well, and he's very loyal to Crane because Crane saved him, and so we get kind of that too, where he's feeling like he maybe he'll be partially my moral compass, or he'll keep me grounded and going there. But they end up being captured by these necromantic creatures that are like part animal, part human. Literally, I mean, there's like people who like they have an ape body but a human head, or like the body of a puma, or like the puma torso, human head, and like ape arms. Literally, there was like a giant serpent that just had a human head. Like all of these just crazy, grotesque, mutilated creatures that have been created by necromancers. And they get in, and we discover that the person who's been running this island is a much, much older Crane. And that kind of brings up something, too, is we really didn't know how many other Cranes they were, but for the most part, the ones we saw seemed to be around the similar age. So this one, we show somebody who's been alive for decades as a piece of Crane and building up, and it really starts to show, too, like, how long has this been happening? We know that from the time our Crane starts, it's been around 3,000 years since his heart was shattered. I mean, like, have there been Cranes living and dying this whole entire time? Consolidating power? It brings up quite a lot of questions, because it's not like this just all of a sudden happened. We now know that this is happening everywhere, and that it's been happening for a lot longer than we realize. Crane doesn't even know if he's the original version of him from his shard. He could have died and then the shard left and started over. And so it brings up a lot of other questions as well, especially because, as we find out, Hanka seems to be manipulating way more than seemed evident even at the end of the first book, and she seems to really be controlling all kinds of things. So as I was reading through, I kept just trying to look at it from that perspective, and it does seem that she really has been, and it started to become pretty apparent in the first book, that she was trying to make sure he got memories in a certain order so he would be what she wanted him to be, finding out that she was his wife and knew him from thousands of years ago when he was the whole demon emperor and all the different pieces. So we already knew she was doing that, but not necessarily the extent, because it does seem that she's been in contact with other Cranes and potentially even specifically set up like every moment of his life almost, this version of him, to have things happen the way that she wanted. She's been doing things behind his back. She's definitely not telling him anything. And the only thing that he's absolutely sure of is that she does love him. But as we find out at the end of this book, because I already said this spoiler, so I'm just going to jump to the end because it was so good. But we find out pretty much for certain that she's the one who betrayed him and shattered his heart, although we don't know the why. But we also find out, which I was theorizing pretty early on, and the more it was talked about, he is actually the one who had taken her heart and commanded her to love him. So she has to love him. Didn't necessarily choose it. We don't know if she like agreed to it as a thing of love, but he ordered her to love him. She has to love him and do what she thinks is best for him, but that might not always be what he thinks is best. And so it was just a really interesting dynamic from this person who does like legitimately Hanka has to love him, has to act in what she sees as his best interests or what's good for him. And it really pulls back to all of the questions of like the greater good. Who defines it? Who defines what's in a person's best interests? Because he might think it's something completely different. She's going to act the way she thinks is best, and really she has to. So it's such an interesting loophole like that as well. So maybe she thought shattering his heart and creating a new version of him instead of who he was was the way to go, and maybe that was going to be the best overall thing. We still don't completely know, but man, it was such an interesting dynamic, and further really went to the exploration of all of the philosophical questions that we got in this book. We also, like I touched on a little bit in the non-spoiler, got a really deeper look into demonology and some of the other magic systems, but also the fact that like binding demons, especially the more powerful they get, seems to really take a toll on your sanity and on your soul in a lot of ways. And we kind of find out that that's potentially why Crane became the way that he was, because he's going and he's binding a demon that's like not even close to as powerful as demons that he did before, whole like gods that were super powerful demons that he bound before, and it already is like ripping away his sanity, and his mind just can't accept the beings. And so that makes you really wonder, like, what the heck would he have been like when he was the Demon Emperor and was doing all of these things. But it was really interesting to explore. But then we find out that it seems, and we still don't completely know what's going on, but it seems that his god, who found him back when he was just part of like a tribal group of people, and like took him from that point, and he became powerful based on all of that. His god, who is in the language that is interpreted here called She Dreams in Blood, is the one who basically helped him subjugate all of the other worlds and accomplish the things that he did. And also, it sounds like may or may not want to completely destroy this world. And so he ends up having to call his god, and just the freaking scene right at the end where she's like inhabiting the body of the mage, just like falling apart and being destroyed because it can't contain her power, and she's like, open the gates, let me in completely. Oh man, that ending was so good, and I absolutely cannot wait for the third book to come out. Just so good. Like I said, the way Fletcher ends these books is just, it's not even quite, I wouldn't really say necessarily like cliffhangers. It's just, it is such a big event. It makes you want to keep reading. And so I really can't wait for the third book. I believe it's supposed to be coming out sometime next year is what it sounds like. I'm hoping for early 2022. I know he said it was 2022 it was going to be coming out, so I'm hoping for soon. It also sounds like it might be a fair amount longer than the first two, which I'm also okay with. I'm so curious to find out more on this obsidian path that we're on here. So Fletcher definitely, these were still the first two books I've read by Michael R. Fletcher, and I've been very impressed. I have Beyond Redemption 2, and we'll be reading that, and he's got a bunch of other books too, so he's definitely an author I will be following really closely and working on reading more of his stuff, because the first two books I've read I've enjoyed so much, and just the way that they're written. I noticed a lot of the other things too had really interesting questions, like Beyond Redemption. The premise of that is always sounded really interesting to me, but the way he kind of just uses the world that's being set up as a canvas for the character study, and he sets up a really interesting world in the Obsidian Path series. The world that's set up, all of the different types of like magic users, all of the different types of creatures. Some humanoids, some not, that exist, like demons and alternate realities and worlds. There is so much set up, and we explore that, but at the same time, all of it's being used to kind of further the character study, the philosophical questions, and the balance is superb with focusing on the character study, building out the world, and then also still having a direct plot where we're moving to. Although I feel like we know what the plot is from the get-go. Find all the pieces of my heart, figure out who I was, go from there. And that's kind of the single-mindedness. That's where Crane is looking, but there's so much that's built around that, so many things that happen around that, that just made this a hell of a ride. So really enjoyed She Dreams in Blood. Very excited for the third book to find out what Crane and Co. are going to be up to for that one. And excited to read more Fletcher in general. So, those were my thoughts on She Dreams in Blood, both spoiler and non-spoiler. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like. If you want to chat this book, any other books, or anything at all, make sure to check the link in the description for the Wizardly Duo Discord. We'd love to have you there to join in the conversation. Always a lot of fun. And of course, if you'd like to see more of my content, make sure to subscribe.